So, we're going to talk about report writing. And in forensics, there are two different kinds of reports you might find yourself writing. One is if you are an investigator at a crime scene and you are writing about what you saw and did at that crime scene. The other is if you are working in a lab and you are writing about the different pieces of evidence that you've analyzed and the findings that you have come up with as you've analyzed that evidence, whatever conclusions you can draw based on that evidence. So, as we go through this slideshow, keep in mind that we're talking about two different kinds of reports, and different things are going to apply differently depending on the situation. One thing that is consistent is that your report needs to be direct and it needs to be clear. This is not the flowery, beautiful prose that you would write if you were writing an English paper. This is not going off into your theories or your suggestions or your ideas for the future that you might do in a social studies paper, or your opinions about how things have affected the state of society, or even academic science research. That's written in a very different style. This is very direct and clear. I saw this, I did this, period, straightforward, not really getting crazy with what you're saying. What you're doing when you record your observations is you're trying to verbally let somebody be in the room with you. Ideally, there are going to be photographs and there's going to be video and there's going to be sketches that go along with all of the reports and notes that you're submitting. However, sometimes photos get lost. Sometimes people just don't have time to look at every single piece of supporting evidence. All they've got time to do is skim through a report. And so they're going to skim through your report, and you have to make sure you are being descriptive enough that they are seeing what you see, that they are perceiving what you are perceiving. And so you have to make sure that you are being just that descriptive. That imagine if you didn't have photos and all somebody had was your report to go on. Would they be able to draw a picture of the crime scene based on your words? Because if they can't, then you might not be descriptive enough. So you want to make sure you're being really plain, straightforward, to the point, but also getting all of the information and details in. If you are going to make an inference, then you have to make sure you substantiate your inference. So you can't, in a crime scene report, just go in and say there were signs of a struggle. You need to say there were signs of a struggle, and then you need to say there was a chair that was knocked over, the cushions were ripped off of the couch, that there was a lamp that that appeared to have been on the table but was now on the floor and smashed in pieces. Even better, though, just don't say there were signs of a struggle. Just say all of those things that you saw. But if you're writing a lab report, part of your job is to draw conclusions and it is to make inferences. And so if you're going to do that, then you're going to justify them with your data. And so you are going to say that because the blood agglutinated with these different antibodies, you believe this blood to be type A positive blood, and that it is consistent with suspect one's blood, something like that. So anytime an inference is being made, you need to justify it. If you can, though, you might want to just step away from inferences. If you are making inferences, you also have to make sure that you are aware of how your inferences could be wrong. For example, when a DNA analyst writes their report, they give a level of certainty. So even though that level of certainty might be 1 in 391 quintillion people will have this same DNA profile, that's giving you saying, hey, if you get 391 quintillion plus 1, you might have 2 people with the same DNA profile. So you're always being aware of how you might be wrong. You're never saying, I am 100% right. This is a match. This is ideal. I am perfect with what I have said. You're always aware that there could be not mistakes, but just differences to how just certain evidence is being interpreted. So this is actually a real report. This is a report from the Des Plaines Police Department from when they went and searched John Wayne Gacy's house. They were working a missing persons case. There was a guy named Robert Piest. And he was missing. And it turns out John Wayne Gacy ended up having been a serial killer. I believe his number of victims was in the 30s. He actually was the one who had them buried in the crawl space below his house. He also had several victims who he threw in a river. And yeah, he's somebody you can dive deeper into if you would like to. But I just want to show you parts of this report just so that you can see how direct it is and how straightforward it is. So it starts with, the following is a list of items recovered by a reporting officer on a search warrant served on the 13th of December, 78, that would be 1978, at 8213 West Summerdale in Norwood Park Township, the residence of John W. Gacy, and the telephone number 457-1614. This is so old that we did not automatically attach area codes in front of our phone numbers. And so you had to know if he was in Des Plaines what his area code was going to be. My guess is in 78, it was a 312 number. So located in the bedroom on the northwest side of the residence, on top of the dresser, I cut off part of that, was against the south wall next to the closet. Oh, the dresser, which was against the south wall next to the closet, were 2 adult paperback books. Taken from the first drawer in that dresser from a plastic bag was 1 switchblade knife. Also taken from a cigar box, which had the name Swisher Naturals, a name of cigar located in the second drawer of that dresser, was a clear plastic bag containing a crushed green plant-like material. So notice that they're pretty sure that's cannabis, but they're not going to say this is cannabis because I don't know this is cannabis. Maybe he just really liked having tarragon around his house, and so he had it in a little sachet in his top drawer. We don't know. Also, cigarette papers were taken. Taken from the second drawer was also 2 paperback books about gay people. Found in the middle of the top of 3 cabinets in this dresser was a temporary Illinois driver's license to a Michael B. Baker. Foreshadowing. It had a driver's license number of, and the number of the license, the number on the license was. This was located in a Folgers coffee can. So you can see, super descriptive. Taken from the top shelf of the closet in the northwest bedroom, located on the left side of the top of the closet, were 8 brown envelopes containing adult books. Taken from the second drawer of that same dresser on the south side of the northwest bedroom, from a shoebox, were 2 pictures that appeared to be of the same male subject. Taken from a dresser located along the east wall of the bedroom on the northwest of the residence, second drawer, were 7 colored adult films. So going on, you see. Now, I would have personally liked it if the person who wrote this report had talked all about the dresser and then talked all about the closet and then talked all about these different things. That would have been great. But you can see that they're not saying, oh, many fine and fabulous items were discovered in the top drawer of this dresser. It has made us very suspicious about the whereabouts and the motives of the person who lives in this house. No, they're just saying, here's what I found, here's what it was. And they're giving you very explicit directions about it was this drawer, it was on this side of the drawer, or this side of the closet, or up at the top, or where it was. So if you want to read the entire report, go ahead and hit pause on this. You can zoom yourself in and out and read all of it. There are some very exciting plot twists in here. So you just go nuts as you read this. But for our purposes, I think I've gotten my point across here. So what I want to have you do now is I'm going to have you practice taking a report that maybe isn't as well written and writing it more directly and more clearly. So I'm going to take this report. Again, if you want to pause and read the entire thing, you can pause and read the entire thing right now. But I'm going to take little chunks of it and I'm going to have you practice that. And then I'm going to show you how I might rewrite it. Now, I want to emphasize there is not one way to rewrite this. There is not one perfect way to rewrite these things. I'm just going to show you how I would rewrite it. And Maybe I'm wrong, maybe there are better ways to do it, but it's definitely more direct than what is here. So let's start with this one. And one thing I want you to keep in mind is that Officer Janet Ruiz has her name already at the top of this report. We already know who wrote this report. So she doesn't need to name herself in here. So that's a hint for how you should go ahead and work on writing that next sentence. So what I want you to do is right now stop, try to rewrite this sentence, and then you can come back and I'll show you what I said. Okay, now try this next one. Keep going. Make sure you're being really critical with yourself as you assess how you've done. Did you do a good job? Good job. Okay, so we're going to stop here. If you want to go back later and you want to try to rewrite the entire report, here's how I rewrote the entire report. Again, I want to emphasize that what I did is not necessarily perfect, but it is a more direct, straightforward way of saying what needs to be said. All right, so if we're going to talk about lab reports now, not police reports anymore, but lab reports. It should be noted there is not one universal lab report that's used by all laboratories, but there are common elements to all reports. So no matter what lab you work in, you're going to have some of the same components in your lab. You're going to make sure that on your report, you're identifying the agency at which the tests were conducted. Often this is pretty easy to do because you just put your report on department letterhead and then it's all the information is right up there. You're going to put your name on there. They need to know which examiner conducted the tests. We need to know that it was you. So if we have questions or we need to have you testify in court, we need to be able to get in touch with you. And so you're also going to include your contact information, maybe your phone number, maybe your email, something so that we can get in contact with you if we have questions. We need to know two different sets of dates. We need to know the dates on which the tests were conducted and also the dates on which the report was written, because those aren't always the same dates. Sometimes you spend multiple days testing or you spend multiple days writing the report. Sometimes you do the testing one day and then you write the report on another day. If there's a long period of time in between when you performed the tests and when you wrote the report, that tells us something. And that might mean that we've got some questions for you when you come into court about why was there such a long period of time? It might be legitimate. Maybe you had to leave on a family emergency. And when you came back, you wrote the report as soon as you could. At the same time, are your observations as fresh after having dealt with a family emergency as they were before you left to go deal with that? That's all important information. We need to know if there was a time span in between when you did the tests and when you wrote the report. And so both of those sets of dates have to be on there. And then of course, we're going to need to know the case ID number and we're going to need to know the evidence ID numbers. Now, here's an important point. While all evidence must be packaged separately, so if you've got shell casings, you're going to have an envelope for every individual shell casing. On a report, you can write about every shell casing that you analyzed in that one report. It is not necessary. It would be silly to write up a full report for every single evidence item if they're all coming into the lab. That's just a waste of time on everybody's part. That's a waste of your time for writing the report. That's a waste of time for the people who are going to be reading the report. So you can have multiple evidence items in the report, but when you package the evidence, it all has to be packaged separately. The information in your analysis needs to be really, really clear. So you need to make sure you're stating what your observations are and what the results were of any tests that were run. And then separately for that, or clearly for that, clearly separate from that, or clearly distinct from that, you're talking about whatever conclusions you can or cannot draw from the observations or the test results. So remember, we said there's basically 3 conclusions that you're going to draw. Either suspect, victim, whatever, this person or this known could be the donor of this evidence item or is consistent with this evidence item, or this victim, suspect, exemplar is not consistent with this evidence item or is possibly the donor of it, or inconclusive. But remember, inconclusive means you didn't have enough material to test, or something went wrong with your testing reagents, or there was a problem with the testing. Inconclusive doesn't mean you can't make a decision. Doesn't mean too close to call. It means something went wrong and you literally cannot draw a conclusion because you just don't have testing data to draw a conclusion from. So remember that when these reports are entered into evidence in court, they have to be legible. So they really should be typed. You can see, even back in 1978, they were typing on a clickety-clackety typewriter. So if in 1978 they could type their reports there, you, with all of your technology that you have at your fingertips, should certainly be able to type your reports. There is no reason for you to be handing in handwritten reports short of some drastic power outage or Armageddon that has left us only with paper and pens or pencils. You need to have impeccable grammar and spelling. Again, there's so much technology now. There is no excuse for you to have spelling errors. There's no excuse for you to have grammar errors. Go in, figure out what all of the situations are that you need to figure out. Take care of them, because technology can do this for you. So even if you're somebody who just really, really, really struggles with spelling, that's okay. Get your Grammarly out there to help you out. If you are going to handwrite them, they need to be in blue or black ink. I guess you could technically show up to court with a paper with a report written in pink sparkly gel pen, but you're probably going to lose some credibility. The jury's probably going to look at you and go, what's going on over there? So blue or black ink, and if they're printed, they should be printed in black ink. You don't want to have like a rainbow printed report or anything like that. And then the last thing I want to say is you absolutely cannot include any information you cannot have, or that you do not have. So if you haven't been given information, you cannot include it. You cannot jump to reports. A lab report is never, ever, ever going to say, this person did it, or this person is the culprit, or this person committed the crime. The best you can say is this person is possibly a donor of the blood found in this location. Let the investigators decide how they left the blood there, why they left the blood there, and how that blood was connected to the crime and how the crime took place. You are just there to say, I looked at this evidence, I tested this evidence within my methodology, and these are the conclusions I can draw based on my evidence testing. How it fits into the rest of the case, that is up to somebody else. That is up to the investigators to figure out. Okay, so I have just a little sample lab that I created in lab report that I created in Microsoft Word. It's nothing great, it's no great shakes, it's just basic, but you can see at the top, we know what lab I work for, the Nutrioforensic Science Lab. I've told you that this is going to be a serology report. I have the examiner information. You've got title, what unit they work in, email address, phone number. Don't call that number. I don't know whose extension that is. Don't call that number. That's some Nutrior number, but I don't know whose it is. Don't call it, please. We've got the date of the report, that I wrote the report on November 4th, but notice that I did the testing on November 1st and November 2nd. We have the case number. You see the items that were tested. You don't need super crazy descriptions in there. It's just information that I was given based on the chain of custody. And then I told you my testing procedures used. So all evidence samples, which were 15, 18, and 21, were classified as blood based on the Kastle-Meyer test performed in the field by Detective G. Sung and submitted for serological examination. So the reason we can call those blood and we're not calling them a red blood-like substance is because we figured out with a presumptive test in the field that this is blood. So because that was already done, I'm acknowledging that in my information about testing procedures used. Exemplar samples, 56, 57, and 58, were obtained by ACREV RN, so the nurse took those samples. That's how I know those are blood. And then what I did is standard ABO positive negative agglutination blood typing was performed on all evidence and exemplar samples. So now I've told you what my methodology was and what I used. So now here are my results. This is what I found. On item number 15, which again I'm reminding you was the swab with the blood sample from the East Room wall, the sample agglutinated, that's just a fancy science word for clumped. The sample agglutinated with the addition of anti-A antibodies and anti-B antibodies, and did not agglutinate with the addition of anti-RH antibodies. Blood type determined to be AB negative. So I'm telling you, here's what I saw. Agglutination, agglutination, no agglutination, and then here's the inference I drew from it. This is what the blood type is. Now, you don't need to understand anything about that blood typing stuff right now. I just want you to see how this is very straightforward, very factual. And notice when you pause and read this, which I'm going to tell you to do, pause and read this, notice that every one of these follows the same format. So it's very structured and they all follow the same format. Here's what I saw. Here's what I determined. Here's my inference that I made. So go ahead and pause this and read through these. All right, and then here are my findings. So item number 15, which was one of my questioned items, I've said the victim can be included as a possible donor of this sample. Suspect 1 can be excluded as a possible donor of this sample, and suspect 2 can be excluded as a possible donor of this sample. Then for item number 18, I said the victim can be excluded, suspect 1 can be excluded, and suspect 2 can be included. Item number 21, the victim can be included, suspect 1 can be excluded, suspect 2 can be excluded. So again, very straightforward, same formatting, very direct, just here's what I figured out. Now, stop and ask yourself, for my findings, do I only have 3 samples that I addressed? Well, that's because the other 3 samples were all exemplars. I know where they came from. I got those on purpose. So I went to the person's arm to find those. We don't need to try to match those up with a source. We already have them individualized. They're the exemplar that we found. In our findings, we're just talking about with our unknowns, what are they consistent with? Where could they have come from? Because those are questioned samples. So in this lab report, I looked at 3 questioned samples, 15, 18, and 21, and then 3 known samples, 56, 57, and 58. So when I go to say my findings and my conclusions, I only need to talk about the things that were questioned. Okay? That's it about report writing. Hopefully you feel a little bit more comfortable with it and you're ready to do a little bit more of it later on.